Meeting's now being streamed on YouTube, and I did pause the recording.
And stuff.
Thanks, Pat. Good morning, everybody. Can everybody hear okay?
Yes.
Hello. Good morning.
All right. It
Wonderful.
looks like our recording has just started. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to day 2 of the STAC committee. Today, we are going to be focused on reviewing the RTP applications. I guess really quick, do we want to do a quick sound off? Who's here in the room?
Sure.
Okay. In the room, we'll start over here and go this way.
Yep. So Mark Smolin from Big Fork. Mike Patterson from Butte.
Tom Lang, FWP.
Stephanie, RTP.
Bob Walker, not Helena. Clancy.
Jenny Sullivan, Missoula Helena. Shelby Clark, MDT Helena.
Okay, and then online, we'll start with Stephanie.
Hi, everybody. Stephanie Brown. I'm zooming in from Kalispell this morning.
Christy.
Christy
Drake from Billings, Montana.
Beth.
Good morning, everybody. Beth Shoemate, Assistant Administrator here out of the Helena Fish, Wildlife and Parks office. Good to see a lot of familiar faces, and just wanted to say thank you for all of the time and energy and hard work put in both behind the scenes to get to this stage and for the yesterday and today.
Madeline.
Good morning, Madeline checking in from Eureka.
Carolyn.
Good morning, Carolyn Miller from Federal Highway.
Adam.
Hi, good morning. Adam Brooks, Financial Assistance and Compliance Bureau Chief here at Fish, Wildlife and Parks.
All right. Thank you for doing that for the sake of the minutes. If folks are on here for public comment, I believe we'll be having comment at 9:30. Is that accurate? That is accurate. So if you're on here for that, hold tight. And of course, some other folks might be jumping on. Okay, so before we get into the applications, just wanted to pause and see if anyone had any overall questions or whatnot about this year. I'm going to pull up a very quick slide just showing what we received, distribution, and the process that we've been taking. So let me just pull myself together.
So hard having the 23 applications.
So if you sort, no, if you hit the sort
There's a
on,
sort, Beth?
yeah, all the columns are sortable. So the very left one, not the number, but the
Right. Due date?
Yeah. No. Sort by the name where it says like 2023 recreational trail program. If you click on that column header, you can resort and get them all to the top.
Stephanie, I just wanted to point out quickly that Carol Hennessy has also joined as a panelist, and I don't think that she had a chance to introduce herself yesterday, so maybe we can have her introduced quickly.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Carol.
Good morning. Yeah, I'm Carol Hennessy. I'm with the Forest Service out of Region 1, the Trails Program Manager. I'm in Camp Wilner's place, and this is my first year participating in the STAC. I appreciated all that you did yesterday and looking forward to today to learning more. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Okay, so the 2024 Recreational Trails Program review and comments. A quick breakdown of what we received this year. It was another plentiful year of applications. I believe we're reviewing 45 or so applications. Here's just a very quick breakdown of how we've categorized them between the non-motorized, diversified, and motorized categories. You'll see that there's also a non-motorized diverse and a motorized diverse category. Those are a little weedy, a little bit of a weedy category, but they do exist in the realm of RTP diverse categories. It's something that we use, but I wouldn't overly think about it. You can just consider them non-motorized together and motorized together. So, you know, it looks like 30 non-motorized applications altogether, 11 diversified, and 6 motorized applications. Included in that, 7 applications included equipment purchases, 7 applications included elements of education and outreach or safety awareness, 24 included existing trail maintenance, and 11 included new trail or trailhead construction. And those numbers right there won't add up correctly to the number of applications because a lot of people, they ask for multiple things. There was a lot of application where they wanted to do trail maintenance and purchase a piece of equipment, or they were doing education and outreach along with trails construction, things like that. So that's why it's a little wonky there. And I just wanted to represent, kind of show you what people are asking for. Definitely an increase in equipment purchase requests, which makes sense because of the BABA waiver that went in place for a year. That's been a big benefit, I think, or a potentially big benefit to folks because there's a lot of equipment that wouldn't be Build America, Buy America compliant before. And we don't know how long we're going to have this waiver in place for folks to be able to buy equipment without worrying about Build America, Buy America. Some might say that this will be the only time. So I think going into this cycle, we definitely prioritize those equipment purchases a little bit because of the limited availability of that and the unknown surrounding it. So we'll obviously see that a little bit more as we go through each of the applications. Overall, 2.1 million available in requests and just under 1.5 million available for funding. So unlike Tom, we don't have quite the flexibility, so decisions get a little bit tougher as we go through applications and determine what we can and cannot fund. And then you'll see the pools, the non-motorized, diversified, and motorized pool pockets of funding. That's our technically required levels of funding for each of those categories. Pretty obvious off the bat is that we did not meet the motorized requirement. So one thing that can happen there, and a lot of this is we're still trying to figure it out, so maybe we'll probably do more talking in the springtime, but we're gonna have to figure out a way to cover the gap going into next year. Because right now I think we're sitting around $58,000 in the hole for the motorized pool due to lack of applications. So next year we'll probably want to really work to find projects to fill that gap back up. So I've done a little bit of talking with Seth in particular because he's obviously very connected with the motorized groups. So we've been chatting about some possible opportunities for next year and how we can fill that in.
Stephanie.
Yeah.
MTVRA, they fell short this year.
Did they?
2 on motorized.
Uh-huh.
And they just missed the deadline. I remember I talked to Russ Enos, you know, they're commonly in here for 100,000.
Mm-hmm.
They just flat missed the deadline this year. So it was a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
If they'd been in, then we'd be okay on motorized. Oh, well.
Good to know. Okay. Great. Maybe next year.
So would FWPs like the snowmobile program under Seth be allowed to request a grant?
No.
No.
When I say I'm working with him, he can help identify clubs that might have like a special project that they could apply for or something like that, or where there's opportunities, someone could apply for RTP and use the snowmobile grant as match to RTP, or just trying to think of other ways to solicit applications.
Stephanie, I think it's important for the group to know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a department decision, is it not? As far as the department not applying for money?
Yeah.
I still think that's a big mistake. FWP used to be able to apply for RTP money.
Yeah, just like the Forest Service does.
Exactly. And there was a policy decision apparently made in the department. They couldn't apply for money, and I think that's a bad mistake.
Mm-hmm. And that's where I think the STAC is so important to oversee that kind of thing. I would fully support that with full STAC oversight, you know, because you've got the public involved. So.
Good.
Yeah, that's one where a place where the federal highway administration will allow it. You'd think they'd have more, they usually do have more strings than the
Right.
state does. That's not in that case.
Yeah, I would agree.
And that's not Stephanie's. She has to administer.
No,
the
I
program, let's put it that way.
totally get that. You're
Take that one off my plate. All right, cool. So next slide.
Actually, I do have one quick.
Oh, yes.
And so I saw you did break these things out into education and outreach. I was just, so my question was, I guess, are these mostly non-motorized or diverse or?
That's really good question.
I was just curious how that was being categorized, because that's not one of the 5 that the feds outlay.
Yeah, so all the education and outreach and the safety awareness ones still fall within a non-motorized, diverse, motorized category. Ruby Habitat is non-motorized. All the avalanche centers are diversified.
Okay.
So they're diversified or non-motorized.
Okay.
Great. Okay. This is just a really quick look at the distribution of where the applications are coming from and their categories. Again, like I mentioned, there's a lot of categories that overlap with each other. This is based off of what the primary or the most amount of funding was for. So that's just taking a look at kind of like you did yesterday with Tom's, where are the applications coming from? As you can see, you know, nothing came out of region 6 or 7. We had a lot of discussion about that Eastern Montana piece yesterday. A few coming out of region 4, a few out of region 5. And then of course we see the clusters around Missoula, Kalispell, those kind of larger populated areas. So any questions on that? Okay. And then just a quick recap on where we are in the process. Of course, we're here today at the STAC meeting. Welcome, if you didn't know. So previous to this, over the last month, the internal committee did a review and scoring of the applications individually. And then we held an internal meeting a week or 2 weeks ago to discuss those scores, put them together, and they made recommendations of just general full funding, partial funding, no funding to propose to the STAC here today. So that's what we're bringing to you today, is what the STAC has proposed, and then we will obtain your input. As you probably saw, this little sheet here has spaces for comments. So highly encourage you to write any comments you might have down there. And I'll collect these at the end, take them back to my office, consolidate any comments on that. And then we have a final decisions meeting on Friday where we'll review the comments along with what's been scored and whatnot, and kind of prepare that final decision notice or get ready for the environmental review portion of the process. So decisions meeting, environmental review, public comment, notice of a conditional awards, April, May-ish timeframe, and contracting usually happens by July 1st. And part of the reason that that is such a longer timeframe than for TSP is that we have to go through all the extra federal steps to get everything obligated correctly in the program or in their systems. So that's the gap there. Any questions, process, timeline?
Did we have to disqualify anything?
There are a few that were ineligible. One didn't have proper, what's the word I'm looking for? Not communications, approvals by like the county or the landowner. There were 2 others. Somewhat unfortunate because they probably would have been okay underneath Tom's program. It was a timeline issue. The project was to happen in June and we just can't get contracts out in time for those kind of things. Projects they could probably reapply in the future if they really wanted to, if those things were adjustable. Okay. I'm gonna close that and I'm just gonna pull up the sheet that everybody else has in the room to share. Share screen. Share. And for folks online, the email that was sent out for today's meeting should have this sheet attached. And you can always write out your notes and email them to me as well from the STAC committee. But looking here, I have divided them, as you might have seen, by motorized applications, and then education, safety awareness applications, and then all of our diversified and non-motorized applications. That just seems to be kind of a form that we want to see how they stack up against each other. So that's how I've organized them today. So starting with the motorized, we're hopping right into it. Motorized applications. We have 6 of these, starting with the Flathead Snowmobile Association. They did also apply to TSP, but from my understanding, they separate the areas pretty well in what they're using funding for one versus the other for. This one got a recommend full fund from the internal committee, and maybe to speed things up a little bit, all the motorized applications got a recommend full fund from the internal committee based on where we are with those motorized funding levels, and not having too many red flags pop up across discussion. But I still want to open it up for comment here to see if anyone has anything they would like to add.
Yeah, just on the Flathead one, it is, so they do contract grooming under the TSP, and they do the club-owned groomer and state-owned groomer.
Yep.
On this one.
Which is a great, nice, clean way of separating it.
And it's worked for us so much time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
These are all established programs.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, they've all been around for well more than 20 years, so it's not like there's anything new coming in, so.
I went back through the Kings Hill one, and I did feel like their narrative was really lacking.
Yeah.
And I'm actually, I was invited to their grooming association meeting tonight, so I'm gonna let them know about that.
Give them some hints.
That's fair.
So, but yeah, and I told, I went through it, and I'm just like, guys, you can't just, just saying, and the guy that runs it is an accountant, former retired accountant, and he just says, see the spreadsheet, the spreadsheet tells you everything. It's like, you need to say some words.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
And I mean, they did have words above their spreadsheet, but it didn't hit the points that needed to be hit, and I get their score.
As far as an
I think that's
application.
what killed their score, wasn't it? Primarily?
Yeah, so they did rank at the bottom if you put them all together. Part of that, a lot of that was just narrative.
Yeah.
If we didn't already have like an established history with them, I think we would have had a lot more discussion about it, but I think it just came down to narrative, and I was gonna reach out. There's definitely some stuff, making sure when the application transfers to a contract that language is cleaned up quite a bit. So we'll be working with them on that.
A suggestion to them, Mark, tonight, because of their low score, tell them that it was because we didn't get a couple of big applications.
Yeah,
It's
if
the
we'd have
only
had
reason they're getting money.
if we would have had the trail riders, and
They wouldn't have gotten it.
Yeah, they
if
may have
we'd
gotten
had-
a big haircut.
Yeah. So just warn them about that.
Will do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question. I have a comment.
Yep.
How do we hold them accountable to that? And I mean, to make sure that they do not just say, see the attachment. I mean, can there be something in the guidelines that say, don't just say, see the attachment? Because that is something that it just torques me every single time. Like, it's.
I would agree with that comment. It's like, I hate having to open attachments like that, it's like, it just.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think people understand that, we've got 40 different applications to read. And when you have to see the attachment and in the narrative, then you have to scroll down, leave where you were, click on it, open up, and then it downloads to your computer. So, if you had to do that 40 times, if they knew that, I think that they wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Also, opening Excel files and Word docs, it's like, can we
It's a lot.
just do PDF? Yeah, because it's so easy to print PDF today. It's just
Fair.
part of the OS. So it's like that should probably be looked at as a requirement long term.
Yeah, I think a lot of this just comes back to the training portion, and we do a training, we post the training. So if we
Yeah.
can just encourage them to participate that in,
Yeah.
if they come back again. And again, like I reiterate so many times that I am very free and open to review draft applications before they submit. I provided assistance to a number of folks drafting their applications. And overall, I feel like same with TSP, I felt like the quality of applications really went up this year. So I hope that's getting across, but of course we just got to get them all. So.
Yeah. Tom, just curious, I mean, do you offer the same, do you help, will you review a grant and draft?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll do that. And then this year, my scores didn't count in the internal review process. But yeah, I'm available.
Okay, I
and-
just
and
wasn't
meeting.
sure on that, so
Yep.
I didn't want to promise it if it was.
Yeah.
You didn't know. Okay, great.
Okay. All right, so we talked about Flathead and a little bit about Kings Hill. Any comments regarding West Yellowstone? Just doing a quick temperature check.
Snowmobile capital of the world.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
That's what I wrote.
Fair. Missoula Snowgoers Snowmobile Association. Any comments?
I was actually surprised at how small their request was, but they also have a TSP one in
Yeah.
there as
Mhm.
well, so, but,
Mhm.
yeah.
Great Falls Trail Bike Riders Association. I will note that they are also asking for the purchase of a UTV and transport trailer.
For a what? I'm sorry.
Transport trailer and UTV for trail maintenance.
Okay.
Mhm, mhm. So that one's a little bit unique in this category.
That's a good idea, though. We've done that through the state OHV program, and actually we did in the past in the snowmobile program.
Mhm.
On equipment purchase, but OHV, we've purchased a couple of trailers for transport of equipment, but also for education programs. So it's not a new thing.
Yeah, yeah. And like we said, now seems to be the time. Okay. Bitterroot Ridge Runners Snowmobile Club.
It's an incredible trail system up there. And this is one that where it's a 2-year grant and they only apply every other year. So, they take into our time into consideration pretty good on that one, I'd say.
You're biased. You just rode the scout.
I just was in scout mode with 2 feet of powder last week. So it's
Having all the feelings right now.
but the groomer was down and it was like, so I was like, the trail.
Fair. Okay, any last comments regarding motorized applications before we move on?
Actually,
Yeah.
just quickly, and this is general, like we were talking yesterday about that, every other year thing. There's a couple of organizations that have done this, so maybe we use them as our leaders or mentor, approach them first in this concept because they're already doing it.
Yeah.
And they might have some insight as to the pros and cons of doing it and advice to other organizations.
And I'd say I kind of feel like there are a number of folks under RTP doing that because they get the contract in July, they use whatever they can for, the upcoming winter, and then they'll finish off the funds in the following winter before the grant expires. So it definitely is helpful. I mean, people, they do it. But a lot, okay. Complications.
Yeah.
There's other stuff as part of that. Like, can they still get enough money to get through the 2 years like the Yellowstone? I mean, it's 90.
Right.
Like
Kings Hill, they apply every year
expensive.
because that way they have money available and they're not waiting for a
Mhm.
contract to start or something like that. So
Yeah.
it really smooths things out that way. And dropping it down to, what is the requirement now? Like every 6 months we have to?
8, no, it's still 8.
8 months.
Yeah.
Okay, so that helped by extending out that number to 8. 'Cause I think originally it was 90 days or something.
Was it?
Yeah. And so it was really hard.
Yeah.
In the summertime, we don't have any expenses.
You're just like holding on to
Yeah.
receipts.
So the 8-month piece really helps.
Fair. Okay. Let's move on to the education and outreach, safety and awareness applications. This is always a difficult category. As a reminder, we can only award out about $80,000 in education, outreach, and safety awareness. I think we're sitting on over $100,000 in funding for that. So I think first I just want to I'm just going to go one by one down here. Ruby Habitat Foundation, this was for putting in new interpretive signage in Madison County. This was an incredibly small ask. This was an ask that made me realize that we don't have a minimum for our TP request.
Yeah, wow.
However, in discussions with the internal review committee, we did find that it's such a small request in the large scheme of things. It's an area that doesn't really apply much for RTP funds or things like that. And they felt like it could have a really positive impact for a very small amount of money. So the internal committee did recommend a full fund on this one. Comments?
I think
It just
you're
seems
right.
like the trouble of it.
It's a lot of
not
work for
worth
some-
Yeah.
But if we can help them
Yeah,
out.
hey, yeah, if they're willing to put the paperwork together, go for it.
Was there a comment online?
I just said, I totally agree with that. Yeah, fully fund.
Great. And Stephanie, don't feel afraid to like interrupt me if I'm missing out on people with raised hands or whatnot. Okay. The next one is the U.S. Foresters Flathead Avalanche Center for, they come back pretty annually for their salaries to do avalanche reporting.
Yeah.
For $45,000. And I always want to group these, but I'm going to pause and just see if anyone has any particular comments. Okay.
It seems like avalanche reporting is just an important thing that I feel like we should fund all of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is where it's hard to separate these applications. The Flathead Avalanche Center, the West Central Montana Avalanche Foundation, which is a nonprofit, not part of the Forest Service. And then the U.S. Foresters Gallatin National Forest Avalanche Center. They all come pretty annually for the same amount of money. And the unfortunate thing is we just can't fund them. We either can't fund them all or we can't fund them to the levels that is helpful to them. Because again, we only have $80,000. So if they're all asking for 45, that means we can't even fund 2 of them fully. So this is always a hard one to figure out what is the most beneficial thing to do. As you can see here, I do have the scores from the internal committee around here. So Flathead Avalanche Center is 36, West Central Montana Avalanche Foundation 34, and then the Gallatin 33.
Wow.
Stephanie,
Really tight, really close.
I understand, or I think there's been discussion about maybe trying to push the agencies over to the RTP program and maybe concentrate the nonprofits and so on in cities and counties to child stewardship. That's been a discussion. Why in the heck did the avalanche centers only apply for RTP money?
Well, TSP can't do education and
TSP can't
outreach.
do education by law. Yeah.
Come again?
It was written into the rules saying that we can't fund education on TSP. I mean, I can't believe they did that, but it was like, oh,
That was, okay,
Yeah.
now I got it.
yeah,
That was a
That's why
legal
they're not here.
interpretation.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
From
Needs to
FWC.
be.
So I know this is a really inconvenient time to interrupt, but Tom just pointed out that I was wrong on the public comment time. It's actually 9, not 9:30.
Oh.
So I'm so sorry. If we could put this conversation on hold really quick, and I'm gonna hand it over to Jaden for public comment. Very inconvenient.
Yep, so for anyone online wishing to make public comment, please raise your hand now so I can call on you. You'll have 2 minutes to make your comment, and please remember to state your name and spell your last name for us. All right, we've got Lance.
You there?
Yep, we can hear you.
Oh, yeah, I want to speak on the Terry Trailheads deal. We're applying for a TSP grant. We're looking at an anchor site in Perry County. We have some beautiful kiosks that we had gotten the frames from BLM several years ago, and put some really nice kiosks in there. Working with the Badlands to Badlands from the Medora, basically the Terry Wilderness Study Area. And we want to have a trailhead there. We've got a Yellowstone Trail going through the town and stuff like that. We're connected up with them, and we're trying to build a pavilion so that the people can have some shaded areas there. It's next to a convenience store right there at the beginning of the town of Terry. We want this to be our anchor site that we can start building on. We're looking at doing more trails in the around the wilderness study area that we can. We've got the scenic view. We'd like to get out to Powder River. We've got so many trails that end up in Terry, from the Yellowstone trails to the Badlands just so many things like that. So we're looking for that support for that grant. We're going to try to apply for another grant next year for some public restrooms. So this is a beginning of a long-term project or goal for us. I'd be glad to answer any questions that I can for you guys. You still
Thank
there?
you for your comment. Yep. Thank you for your comment, Lance. If they have questions, I think they'll circle back at the end of public comment for you. All right, next we have Cliff Sheets.
Hello.
Yep, now we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Cliff Sheets. Last name is spelled S-H-E-E-T-S. I'm with the Last Chance Nordic Ski Club, and we submitted an application under RTP to buy a new snowmobile for grooming on the Continental Divide west of Helena, and also a new compactor roller. Our situation is that because of a major expenditure in the last year, we built an equipment storage shed on Mac Pass, thanks to prior RTP funding. But because of that expenditure and the fact that the cost was significantly higher than originally anticipated, the club had to dig into its savings basically, and it pretty much wiped us out. And we had a major equipment repair on one of our other snowmobiles of about $7,400 last fall. I was really concerned about maybe bouncing a check. So now we find ourselves with this beautiful equipment barn, and we can store our equipment, so it'll be in better shape long term. But we just have some old equipment, and one of them is a snowmobile that's getting quite old and starting to have reliability issues. So that's the gist of our application. And unlike prior years when we might have been able to dig into savings, we really don't have that flexibility at this point. And so we're really dependent on both the TSP and the RTP programs. But in summary, thank you for your time and consideration, and I'll be happy to address any questions that might arise. Thank you.
Thank you, Cliff. Next, we have Marlena.
Hi, I'm Marlena Lanini. My last name is spelled Lanini. And I just wanted to voice my support for the Billings Big Ditch Trail connector. The Big Ditch Trail, the part that exists, is just a wonderful asset to our city. In fact, when I moved back to my hometown of Billings, I specifically looked for a neighborhood where I could be connected to this trail just to have that access to daily recreation for myself and my family. It's a wonderful trail that's accessible. I have neighbors that use mobility devices, a neighbor that uses a wheelchair, another neighbor that uses a walker that are out there every day. I have a young child that can safely recreate on that trail away from traffic. It's a great asset to our town. The trail just abruptly ends on the west end, and the trail connector would be a wonderful way to open up that access to so many more people and neighborhoods that live just to the west of that trail and provide them with that same opportunity for daily recreation in town. Thanks for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Marlena. All right, Chris.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. This is Chris Lawrence, Sealy Lake Nordic. I'd like to thank you for funding our 2023 RTP grant for grooming. Even with our really poor snow year this year, we've used it all. In normal years, we would groom 6 to 7 days a week, and we see a lot of use now. We've been using the snowcat, and that has vastly improved our classic skiing and the quality of our grooming in general. But that also allows us to groom at night, which fits with our volunteers who have a real day job and can't just groom any old time. So I'd really appreciate funding our grooming for the next go round. We're also requesting some money for trail work to widen and remove hazards. And I'm one of the trainees on the snowcat, and with our really low snow, there was about 6 inches of clearance on each side of the tiller without hitting rocks and stumps. So really slim margin of error. So hopefully, even with the competition, you'll be able to keep things rolling. Appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. All right, now we have a Theodore Wilson.
Hello, Ted Wilson, WILSON from Billings. Wanted to speak to both of the applications, the Trail Connector and Rose Park, because both of them are about connecting Billings. I'm rather new to Billings, and I appreciate that we're trying to close gaps where a trail does abruptly end and you have to find your way around to another place where it picks up again. Both of these projects help connect. Rose Park in particular is one that will connect neighborhoods and also connect Rose Park Elementary School to park and park equipment. And it also activates the northern part of the park that doesn't get as much use by building a trail through it and also making it more ADA compliant by doing some repairs to broken concrete in the park. But appreciate your consideration for both of those applications.
Thank you for the comment. Sam McSherry.
Hello, everyone. This is Sam McSherry. I'm a project manager with the Trust for Public Land based in Bozeman. I am here to shed some public comment on the Yellowstone Heritage Trail, RTP grant. We put in this grant application in conjunction with our TSP grant application. This one is focused on a pedestrian bridge for the Yellowstone Heritage Trail immigrant segment. This project and bridge will allow for the immediate residents of immigrant to connect to the overall trail, which will be 3+ miles and a 23-acre park. The hope is that this sets a foundation for the overall Yellowstone Heritage Trail, which would be 49+ miles from Livingston to Gardner. The bridge will really assist the Independent Living Center just south of Immigrant, as well as some affordable housing members to have an opportunity to recreate outside of their door. It also connects the residents of Immigrant and tourists to other recreational opportunities just to the north, which is there's some DNRC land, as well as the Fish, Wildlife, and Parks fishing access site, the Immigrant West. So this project will really help highlight the connectivity and establish a foundation for the overall Yellowstone Heritage Trail. And this will also, as kind of mentioned in the TSP, be a catalyst for other communities to understand and how to collaborate with other organizations to get projects like this done and create recreational opportunities for those regions in Montana that are seeking more. Thank you for the opportunity to provide public comment.
Thank you, Sam. If anybody else that's on right now wants to raise their hand and make public comment, go ahead and do so. If not, we will check back at 9:30. Oh, we've got another hand. All right, Joe.
My name is Joe Womack. I live in Billings, Montana, near Boulder School and the Big Ditch Trail. I have used the Big Ditch Trail for many years since it was built, and the trail abruptly ends. The existing trail abruptly ends on its west end. The connector that is being proposed is a logical extension of that trail, providing additional access for people in the neighborhood. It is used extensively by people at all times of the year. They actually plow the trail so that bikers and walkers can use it year round. So this extension would be a good thing. In years past, when I got to the west end, I would continue along. Sorry? I would continue on the west end. I would continue westward where there was not a trail, but there was a lot of mud and my dogs liked it. So we used to continue out and go along that way. I think it would really be a great addition to the city of Billings. And enhance the trail system in Billings. One final comment is the Big Ditch or the ditch system in Billings actually provides a lot of an outdoor experience. It's a waterway throughout Billings. The Big Ditch has a lot of there's wildlife. Deer come down, drink. Foxes in the areas around the ditch. There's always flowers blooming in the spring. I've taken many pictures that I've shared with my family and friends over the years throughout the United States as I'm walking along that trail. So I strongly support this, and I hope you will consider granting those funds so we can get that done. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment, Joe. All right. Looks like that is it for now, but again, we can check back at 9:30 because we did make that announcement earlier. So if we want to go back to you, Stephanie, in Great Falls.
Unmuted.
All right, thank you, Jaden. Jumping back in to where we were talking about the avalanche centers. The 3 applications that came in for $45,000 for salaries for avalanche reporting. And talking about we only have $80,000 to fund. We briefly mentioned TSP, which we then remembered they can't use those funds.
So I have a suggestion. If we fund each of the ones that were requesting 45,000, if we fund each of them at 20, and we fund the 4,400, we would have a balance of $14,879.76 to fund the Friends of Flathead.
Right. So I guess
I mean, there's a way to slice
there's
the
always
pie.
part of me that wants to make sure when we do fund them, like, are we funding them to a level that's helpful and useful and worth the management of an RTP grant? Because that is a extra load to put on. And sometimes I feel like when we put like a small amount, like we'll give you like this small amount, they take it because they need it, but it's kind of like that didn't really do anything for us. So I worry about that. I'll just let you know the internal committee thought, and this is still definitely open for discussion as it is every year. The internal committee thought, all right, we're fully funding the Ruby habitat, and then to, as much as we can, fund the Flathead Avalanche and the West Central Avalanche Foundation based purely on scoring. And then unfortunately, the rest of those 3 would not get funding this year, but we were trying to just pull it from the scoring and where we'd be able to make the biggest benefit per org. And this is the hard part too. This comes back to the discussion last year about like, we funded these folks for so long, and are we going to be able to sustain them into the future if we keep getting more education and outreach requests? There were some other education and outreach requests and other applications that's not under this category because it got kind of complicated, and we'll review later. But that's the complication part, because I know there's folks out there who want to use this education and outreach funding, but if we're always tying it up in salaries every year, I don't know how we can justify that in a competitive program.
I'm wondering how we can build sustainability within those, how they can shift to finding funds in other ways so that we can open up the education funding to other things. I mean, I truly believe in avalanche reporting and all of that, but
100.
Is there some model out there that we could push them towards so that they don't come back year in and year out, and it gives other nonprofits or agencies an opportunity to do new and novel things?
I will say, the Friends of the Flathead Avalanche Center, as much as I love them, I work with them quite closely. I also apply for a Roundup for Safety grant through the power company in the Flathead, and I get that. I've gotten that now for like 4 straight years, and we pretty much fund on the one that I apply for through the snowmobile club. We do all the motorized classes, so we fund everybody at 100% for all the classes. So it's a $400 class per person. We reimburse the student for that incredible thing. For that, now they still have to supply a teacher for that. That's what this money of the 45,000 is general. It's going for the people that are out in the field, taking the readings on the snow, as well as paying for students. Now, some of that $400 pays for the teacher that we cover there. So from that standpoint, though, my whole point of that was I could you know, I hate saying this, but it's like, I would say I'm totally fine with not funding Friends of Flathead Avalanche Center based on our limited budget. And I kind of know that they have other methods. So sorry, guys. I really would hate to not fund the Gallatin. That one is so much more dangerous of an area. You know, that's where we lose people yearly.
Well, and the Gallatin system has been one, they've been kind of the leader.
Yeah,
They've provided education to the other
yeah,
avalanche
Doug Chabot
centers.
and the rest of them down there is, you know, they are the ones that basically teach all the others how to do this. And so if I had to stack rank them, I'd say Gallatin, West Central. West Central is so, I know we've had issues with them in the past. Are they doing better with that Avalanche Center lately?
Financially, or
his name that took over Kent, I can't remember. I'm sorry.
Carol.
Carol. Carol, can you speak at all to any challenges that the West Central has had recently versus in the past?
I can just a little bit. They're recruiting for a new ED and they haven't been successful with that right now. They really don't have a lot of funding alternatives. And it's growing more critical. They, there's requests for them to spread out a little bit farther, and they don't feel that they can really do that, even though the requests are there. I agree with you on the Gallatin. One thing I was thinking with those three, and maybe this isn't fair, can you divide the balance by 3 and just give them all partial?
yeah, and that's what I was just, we can, but again, it's that thing where I just want to make sure, is that going to be plentiful enough? If just for all of them to get half. I think in the past we've done that, and I feel like we've gotten some feelings like they're like, well, that's great, but not enough. I just want to make the best
a little bit
of
the
that.
West Center because I'm sorry, I didn't hear you speaking.
Oh no, you're
I'm
good.
sorry.
And then there's also just the competitive, like trying to remind folks that this is a competitive program and that we can't really rely on it year after year after year for space salaries, which a lot of these folks have been relying on that and see it as kind of their base. And it's just concerning again, because if in the future we start to see more education outreach programs, we want to fund those projects, but we can't.
Yeah.
Question.
I know that the
What are the
NGO
other-
is struggling more than the other two. I do know that. And I do know they do not have some of the funding sources. And they are relying on a lot of support from Gallatin right now, as far as just knowledge-based support, not monetary.
Would it be enough? I guess one thing we could do is maybe fund the West Central one at a higher level and then split the other two to smaller amounts, but those amounts would be like maybe $15,000.
What was, so going back, if you take back, if you, I don't know if we're in agreement or not to say cross off Friends of Flathead, but that frees up some money. You've got about 5,070, so you've got to split 74,000 3 ways.
Yeah. Oh, I guess we haven't really talked about the Deer Lodge project yet. That one also scored lower. The internal committee, based on scoring, said we could possibly not fund that one too. Although that one is sad because it is like a different area with like a different project and a very specific thing. So I did like that aspect. It was unfortunate that it just fell lower on the list. I think this one also was a no partial fund.
Yeah, I mean, you either do it or you don't. Not afford that one. That one, it's a small ask. I think we could, if we're good with it, we either do it or don't. But that one, kind of minimalist. I mean, my recommendation is to cross off Friends of, fund the first one and the Deer Lodge, and then just split the remainder across those 3. Now, Carol, if you say West Central needs a little bit more, we could take your guidance on that.
I think that they do. We don't want them to, I mean, and the Forest Service has put more money into there as much as we can this year, but they are in the throes of being an NGO and not USFS supported right now. We're trying to figure all that out. They are growing. They were not successful in recruiting an ED. I think this is a critical year for them. We want them to remain solvent if possible.
I would take that into account.
So if we split the remaining after Ruby and Beaverhead, that would be roughly $24,000 per
I would say do
center.
30 to West Central and the others get the remainder. Yeah.
Agree. I agree with that. The other thing about the Beacon Park is that is truly a new area. It is really important to get that Beacon Park in. And I don't know, it's just a risk factor, right? If we just ask them to reapply next year, I mean, it's one season that they're not going to have that Beacon Park, which is really needed.
Okay. And then, so if 22 went to the Flathead and 22 went to the Gallatin, do we feel that's
Still very
sufficient?
useful money for them.
It is.
Mhm.
Okay.
It funds their feet on the ground. I mean, they might have to cut back a day or something with a person in the field, but
okay,
I could live with that.
So at this point, we're saying not funding the Beacon Park at all.
No,
we did.
Okay.
So right
did.
now we're fully fund the Ruby, fully fund Deer Lodge, higher priority funding to West Central, and then whatever we can split the difference of the remaining for Flathead and Gallatin, and then not funding the Friends.
Yeah.
Okay.
They each get 22 for, and West Central gets 30.
Okay.
Works.
Right.
So how are we gonna, if they come back and they say why in the season scores? I mean, the scoring process just doesn't matter.
No, it matters, but I would
So
say.
we're not following that here.
Well, but what we did was we took into account Carol's input from the Forest Service, where we listened to, as a public agency, public group, we listened to where the need was.
But it's a competitive process.
It is a competitive process as part of the process. That's the way I see it.
I would say their scoring is only 3.
Yeah, when you're only,
difference.
yeah.
If they had scored at 20, I'd be like,
Yeah. Yeah, when you're going 32.6, you got 1.3 points. I mean, 1 point someplace could have, it's like we're really splitting hairs between them. They all scored the same, in my opinion.
But it's scored similar enough, in my
Yeah.
opinion, that it's acceptable. I also think we're trying to save lives. The avalanche centers, it's a part of a life saving.
So I
in
think
that case, it's not like we can put it off for a year.
Well, no, and I understand that. It's just at the end of the day, we are going to be held accountable. So we have to have a reason behind it besides it just felt right, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And again, I say we actually listened to our U.S. Forest Service guidance person that said, if you can give there's a higher need at the West Central, and she will go back to the other agencies and said, we're putting more money into that agency versus the other ones based on need. And I think that's you can stand on that.
Yeah, I mean, I like this conversation. I really appreciate the feedback on this.
Ultimately, it's your decision.
Yeah. But I think there's a lot of validity and like what you guys said about how we potentially could split this up and try and get the most out of our buck. I really feel strongly that moving into the future, and Carol, I don't know if you have any kind of poll, but like anything we could do to help those Forest Service ones particularly find other sources. because I just know that there's definitely strain on this education and outreach money. I know there's projects out there that want to use this money for unique projects, and I think we're going to see that come through, and it's going to be this discussion every time. And it's hard to go up against saving lives.
It is, that's what I think.
Yeah, this
right?
one's so important. And Carol, I had multiple discussions with Kent in past years, asking him literally, how do we create a fourth avalanche center? And he basically said, that's really, that one's probably well with outside the bounds of reality. But you know, it's like, that's how important I think this is. The West Central, just as a reminder for everybody, you really need to understand the territory that they cover. They cover everything from like Hamilton or Lost Trail all the way to Sealy Lake. I mean, they are covering like 4 different mountain ranges, you know, across probably 400 miles north to south, and they have to drive to that to go do their job, you know, and it is a brutal.
So I have another inconvenient interruption, which I do apologize for. We have to check back in for if there's any remaining public comment. Jaden, take over.
Appreciate the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, so if there's someone who didn't get a chance to make public comment earlier and would like to now, go ahead and raise your hand so I can call on you. All right, at this time, there are no hands raised for public comment.
Thank you, Jaden.
Just to circle back on this one final time, as far as working on how to get these avalanche centers out of this pool. Are there friends groups that they could work with, like the Friends of the Flathead Avalanche Center? Could they form?
They do that already.
Do they each one have a friends group?
Yeah, they're
Okay.
they're doing fundraisers.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff out there already. I was actually kind of surprised to see Friends of Flathead apply. You know, it's a great thing, but yeah, they're, you know.
Carol,
Do
funding
do
from
they
the
realize
USDA,
that? I'm sorry, go ahead.
funding from the USDA Forest Service. What is the status of funding from the federal aid, from the feds for the avalanche centers? Because I don't think many people understand that.
Right. I can't tell you off the top what each one is. We do contribute to standing up those, and we do through permit contribute to the West Central. It is a challenge cost share agreement. We did just meet with them. So I am pretty familiar with that. We cannot in any way fund the entire operations of the Avalanche Center. And I think what you heard from Kent is still very valid. And Kent's helping me a lot. I still talk to him a lot about all of these things, but you know, it's very valid. The Forest Service will never probably be able to stand up another one or even completely support the ones that are up now. Our budgets were cut this year. We did not cut the standing support yet to the avalanche centers, but it's not sufficient.
Yeah.
Well, I asked that for a reason. I think a lot of people don't understand. Oh yeah, the Forest Service got a lot of money. No, it's not true.
No.
And the Forest Service is not going to come up with funds to fund the avalanche centers. As far as it being a repetitive for staffing, yeah, that's right. And the FWP has gained a hell of a lot of benefit through the years publicly for funding the avalanche centers. I'm sitting here irritated, not with the group. I'm irritated because of the interpretation of legal with FWP to not allow education programs. We're going to change that.
Yeah.
We've had that. The Montana Trails Coalition has had that as an issue in discussion since Senate Bill 24 passed. And we think that the department has made a serious error in their interpretation on the use of those monies. That is again under consideration by the coalition for a change at the next state legislature to adjust the language for TSP or these kind of programs, for education programs. And I said I'm irritated now, just not because of the discussion here this morning, but because the interpretation of FWP legal.
Yeah.
We're gonna change it.
Well, that, what you're saying is how that is basically, you know, it keeps rolling, and here it's finally hit the wall, literally the avalanche. But that's what happened. So if we took, you know, these requests, 45, 45, 45, and 20, and they were moved into the TSP and that, and I keep saying we, and if the TSP funding
grows,
continues to grow, which is anticipated, and the full amount of that, 100% of the 4%, right? Is put into that program, there's not gonna be a problem. And all of a sudden it's gonna open this up. I'm understanding what you're saying. Okay, just making sure that I'm understanding.
Yeah.
And then we won't have this, it'll be a game changer. So I agree. I think that's very, very much needed.
No comment from the staff.
Well, I'm just curious, do we have a knowledge of how avalanche centers are funded in Idaho or Wyoming or Colorado?
I do not. I do not. I know the Panhandle is struggling to stand one up right now. They're struggling to find the funds for an executive director. And that is all trying to be stood up through the U.S. Forest Service. And I can tell you right now, we cannot find the funds to do that. So that's been an ongoing conversation. And that's just the tip of the iceberg of that conversation. I don't know the whole story, but I know that there's a need. You know, we have been working for multiple years and have not been able to stand that one up.
I've asked Seth that question before because he used to work in Utah, and I cannot remember his response, but I believe there was like another funding source.
Yeah, we can check with him.
Hey, Carol, let me ask you a favor. Since you're an advisor to the Montana Trails Coalition, and we're gonna have a meeting sometime in the next month.
Yeah.
Could you provide information to the coalition at the next meeting about sources of funding for those other programs in Colorado and Utah and et cetera?
I sure can. I can do my best to reach
Good.
out. I've got the contacts. I just don't know the information, but I will try.
Okay, well, we'll put you on the agenda then for the next Trails Coalition meeting.
Yeah, and I am going to try to be there in person. I have it on my calendar. It's in April at some point, but yeah.
The date isn't firm yet.
Right. So I think that was a very full and fruitful conversation. I appreciate it. We'll go ahead and move on from there. And then just as a heads up, I think we'll take a quick break at 10 o'clock. Or unless you guys want to right now.
Do one right now.
Let's do it right now. Yeah. We'll be back at 9:45. Let's just take a nice little breather. Thank you.
problem.
All right, it is 9:04. I'm so sorry. There's a lot of interruptions happening.
Gotta go.
It's not my strong suit. It is 9:45 and we are gonna pick back up here. We are now looking at all of our both diversified and non-motorized applications that came through. Again, they're ordered by score going down the list. So we'll just go one by one, stop for comments, things like that.
Can you refresh us on what the remaining budget is for this section?
Oh my goodness.
That's very.
That was a lot of math.
Oh, you did a really great job with it. It was just a long time ago.
Yeah, let's see. I can pull up.
I think it's 597.64.
Oh, thank you so much. So for diversified and non-motorized together, well, the motorized section was 448, but we only had like 388. And then minus 80,000 for education. I love math. I'm just doing a very quick rough.
300,000 plus 1.5.
Minus really quick. I'm just holding. These are going to be really rough numbers, but around 965, 970 in that realm.
That's what's available.
Yeah, roughly, very roughly.
Wow.
Dollars and cents will get finalized at our final meeting. Okay. No, you're good. So starting with the Missoula City Parks and Recreation Department, this is for the Duncan Trail and Trailhead, accessible trailhead amenities with parking for 15 vehicles and about a mile of an adaptive trail, hard packed gravel trail. Currently, this area, folks are coming in and parking, but it's kind of a, precarious situation that they're using the area. So this is just, alleviating some of those dangerous situations and also providing a more accessible path. This mileage will also connect to the greater Rattlesnake Trail system. Open for comments. I guess quickly noting that this one ranked very well internally and was a recommended full fund from the internal committee.
One quick question.
Yeah.
Accessible trail, hard packed gravel, is that acceptable to Federal Highway Administration? I remember at one time those kind of surfaces weren't considered accessible. They are now.
I don't think they were calling it ADA trail. They were just calling it like accessible, right? Is that?
Yeah, so it's like for adaptive. Those would be suitable for this trail, but if you take additional wheelchair to it, probably wouldn't be ADA compliant,
Right. So that's why it's not, it doesn't say ADA in the application.
It's kind of a question I had. I remember at one point, things were a little more restricted. Maybe not so much now.
No, I think what they just ask is that you do what you say you're going to do. So if you tell us it's going to be ADA compliant and then it was this, then that would be a problem.
Okay.
But they did not indicate that they are trying to do that.
So obviously safety, important, yeah, well needed, and connectivity. So those are the two things.
Those are the big hitters.
And then ADA for trails, it's not necessary, right? It's not transportation. So when it's a transportation facility, it has to be ADA compliant, but recreation can be non-ADA, it can be adaptive, it could be just a trail.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is my neighborhood. So literally like this is part of the Greeno Park issue, but I can speak to the fact that it's I'm glad that it scored so well. They took out, a dam and are trying to restore that area and build an, make it more natural and that whole thing. So it heavily used, and the parking is a mishmash of craziness. At some point, a dog, a person is gonna get hurt.
Right.
I think in the application, they even talked about the emergency, the parking creating.
Right.
danger with emergency vehicles, not they?
It did, yeah. Yeah, so we got full support. It sounds like full support here, so great. The next one, Southway Bitterroot Frank Church Foundation, maintaining trails with their volunteer crews. These folks always rank really well. It's always not a huge request. And they do quite a bit of work. So the internal committee had recommended a full fund open to discussion.
They've been using their money that they've got.
They are usually very consistently, that money goes like pretty quick.
They're stack ranked, right, on this list.
Say that again.
These are stack ranked by score.
These are all the internal committee scores averaged out. Yeah, it is. You're good. You're good. You're good.
Just a trivial point.
Mhm.
And some of these, there was one of them unrelated to RTP, was in Tom's, that pictures are worth 1,000 words.
Mhm.
And somebody says our trails, yeah, they're in bad shape and that, and you look at it and God, they look pretty gosh darn good. But there was one that said that we needed, and it was because of the fire, and it was horrific. And now those
Right.
two pictures were worth 10,000 words. So, some of them with pictures, I like pictures.
Yeah, no, that's
Any
very
comment,
fair.
But that was good.
And I think one of the reasons these folks do well is just the money to how much is getting done is it's very reasonable. It's hard to slash it.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. The next project that ranked pretty well is the Trust for Public Lands. This is the construction of a pedestrian bridge as part of the Yellowstone Heritage Trail and Emigrant. New construction, 100,000. We got a fully fund support from the internal committee, part of the Rails to Trails network. I think TSP was doing a portion, or they had applied to a portion of that. I think there was a small discussion about bridges yesterday, and like
Yeah.
importance of making that
Yep.
connection, and hard to partially fund a bridge.
Yeah. Was this the gentleman too? that-
Yeah, we did have a
He
public
said it's
comment.
gonna be kind of a central kickoff point, right?
Mhm,
Learn a lot
mhm.
more.
Take the trail, 40 mile.
I think it helps
47-mile
connect.
Trail down to
Mhm.
Yellowstone.
Yeah.
It also helps like the connection between, I think, the community and then also some fishing access sites. Sounds like it's quite the hub.
And it scored well, which is nice.
Yep.
to see.
Yeah. Well
It's
done.
nice.
And it's a critical part of the Great American Rail Trail.
Is it?
Yeah.
It's connected to
Cool.
Wyoming.
Helps too. Yeah. I like
Yeah,
that.
it's the part coming into Montana from Wyoming. It's a critical stretch.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Great. Next, MTB Missoula, 5.1 miles of new trails on Marshall Mountain with a focus on adaptive and accessibility features. Again, noting that it's not ADA, but adaptability has been a focus on it. I think they were trying to make a easier route to the top, for just generally more accessible for hikers, bikers, etc. Recommendation from the internal committee was a full fund on this one. Comments?
It's a new park, and this thing is phenomenal. Everything that's going to be offered out at Mount Marshall Mountain in the future, that we can just be part of something really good.
Yeah. Nicely said. Yeah.
It's a regional facility too. It draws people from all over the place. It's a good project. And MTB Missoula is a great group.
Yeah.
They've been very partner oriented.
Oh,
haven't
yeah,
they?
big time.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think John Stegmeyer used to work for Fish, Wildlife and Parks back in the day. Great project. The whole thing was such an incredible it's such an incredible story just to have that park in the public realm. From the county, city, private people purchasing it, allowing the city and the county to find the grant funding to buy it, blah, blah, blah. So I'd love to see more people, not racers, be able to access and use that park like me.
So I do have a question, and it's not specific to this project. I was just, if we have $970,000 and I added up the ask and it's over 1.6, we're cutting over $600,000, and we're gonna hit that before we get to done the second page.
Well, so I would say, so the internal committee made recommendations that I'm putting out here. They're definitely not all full fund. Really quickly, we get into partial fundings and whatnot. And I did what I'm not sharing, but what I've been trying to do internally and, you know, on my own time is like try and figure out generally what do those dollars and cents look like when it comes to partial and full fundings. But it's just a lot of dollars and censing that's hard to like do in this meeting here right now. But getting a sense of like, how do we feel about partial funding? What parts do we want to pull and give and take?
Where does it make sense to partial?
Yeah, where does it make sense? That's kind of like I'm getting the big picture here and then going back and doing the nitty gritty. So
Part of what I'm
yeah.
saying is if we're, you know, right at this point, we're through 3 of them. Or maybe by the time we get through 4, if, you know, if this next Missoula one at 100,000, that's 200,000 of 300,000 that we've already said full funding, and 2 of them are in Missoula. And I know from our conversations yesterday, and you showed us maps about, you know, the dispersion of how projects are dispersed across the state. And, you know, I'm hearing the committee also wanting to, you know, we can only look at what we have, right? And we know that issue, but is it a priority to have more equity in some of that geographical, again, versus the raw score?
Yeah, I think as we go through, if we find like, okay, this is like the 5th high scoring, you know, Missoula project, that's definitely like a conversation. 1 or 2, I'm not as worried about, especially since they're new construction projects.
Yeah.
But I think that's like, yeah, God, I see a little bit of the full picture before we go back.
I'm not saying that, I just wanted to put it out there before we got.
Yeah, and it's definitely, if it's something where, okay, we're not funding an Eastern Montana project because of a 5th Missoula project, I say definitely we need to go back and consider that. But it's kind of a getting the big picture and then going back and kind of doing some nitty gritty detail. But
We
I mean,
didn't
good
have to
point.
cut as much yesterday, so it wasn't as challenging.
Yeah, I know.
That's my concern.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I think for now, just considering the new construction aspect of it, I think this one's a consideration for full funding is what I'm hearing from the group. And like I said, if we keep going through and we're noticing that like, oh, maybe we need to consider some other stuff. Okay. Next, the Custer Gallatin Bozeman Ranger District. This is for 2024 year-round trail maintenance. This is for salaries primarily. They always write a good application. They're just good application writers. However, this is one of those folks that come back every year for salaries. So although they ranked well, the internal committee did recommend a partial fund on this one, just trying to like balance out where the money is going and how often they're coming back for those dollars for salaries. This one was also a very general application. It wasn't like this very specific project is getting done. They're just seasonal work across the board. As far as like, what does that funding, partial funding look like? Somewhere between 45 and 50 is what we were thinking about, but open to discussion.
I mean, it is general, but I mean, they go where they need it, you know?
Yeah.
If they get a big storm, they go fix it.
Yeah.
So I get that.
Yeah, the other thing on that, Custer Gallatin on the forest, you know, they're still dealing with all the flood damage all over on that forest. And so there are monies moving around to other areas and they're trying to fill those gaps. So, but I think I think what you recommended for partial funding could still be put to very good use.
Great. Okay. Next, Billings Trail Net. This is the Big Ditch Trail that we heard some public comments about. This one was another controversial discussion within the internal committee. It's a good application. It ranked well, new construction, all that. The only thing that got us a little gray area in the internal discussion was that the application heavily focused on transportative benefits as opposed to recreational benefits. And the conversation of RTP and the guidance talks about needs to be for primarily recreational benefits and whatnot, but the application really geared towards transportation. We had a lot of discussion and like the differences with, Shelby talked about like how does DOT see those two things. There was a lot of back and forth. I mean, of course, you could use just about any surface as a recreational surface. So I guess this one we didn't really make a decision on. We kind of left it highlighted gray area. And really looking for guidance from the STAC. If you guys, how did you read that application? Did you kind of see that? Your thoughts?
I guess I didn't stumble on that one so much. It's like shared youth paths, transportation, but a hell of a lot of recreation. I mean, that's what it is, whether or not MDT wants to acknowledge that or not. So this project, yeah, transportation was voiced quite a bit, but in my mind, looking at the project, it is recreation.
But are you looking at the project or are you reading the application? Yeah. Right. So like, what is guiding that? Because the application is transportation. But if you're putting your own lens and then reading the project and reading what you want to read, then obviously you can see recreation. But if we're scoring based on the words and just the application on its own feet, it's transportation.
Well, I think that this committee also puts a lot of their own lens on all of these applications. I've heard this over and over and over from the western part of the state. You all talk about the trails that you know so well. So I do think that you have to take that into consideration.
One of the public comments about, if I remember correctly, there was one of the first public comments was a woman, I think, and she talked about using the trail to recreate with a child, and that her elderly neighbors, even one using a walker possibly. Am I remembering this correctly?
Yes, yeah, you're right.
So if it's not in the application, but that's, we're hearing from a user in real time. So there is that component. And I know someone else talked about it, but he also talked about recreating. But I understand what you're saying, Stephanie, about the application not addressing that. I think it's also in an area, if I have it correct, where there's a lot of connection to schools. And that is, for kids, they're riding their bike, it's transportation, but it is recreation, right? So there's that component.
I heard, from the public comment, I wrote down universal access and connector opens access.
The struggle I had with it is, and I know this is the reason why it's a large price tag for a very short section of trail, but that does lend to the fact that we're hearing that people who have mobility issues are using it, and they might not be able to use it if it was not a hard surface. So we had this conversation last year too about the cost of that.
Right, the cost of hard surface trails.
It's just ridiculous.
Yeah,
it is.
But the value is also very, very high.
Small context with the dollar associated with this. I did notice that there's an IDC indirect cost rate that they used on it, but they didn't use it correctly. So I have to reduce how much they had in that query. So this will probably be, I think it's like $10,000 that they were over what they can ask for.
Okay.
So this is probably closer to 89,000, just an FYI. And they did say no, they would not accept partial funding. for this project. Continue.
Ask this question, would this would be a valid one for TSP, right?
Yes. Yep.
Just double
And
check.
it would probably be, based on what Shelby's saying, it'd probably be or the
Alternative.
Yeah.
Transportation alternatives.
It could be, I mean, I don't have it in that for some reason, so I need to look at another, so I can't say a definitive yes, but it might.
transportation alternatives.
Do they have any funding right now?
This year is not it's two years.
Billings does not have transportation alternatives funding for this year. They're using it for the Stagecoach Trail.
Billings is an MTO, so they get their own pot of TA funds. So MDT would not be scoring their grants. They'd still have to apply to TA, but it's their own internal committee that scores those grants. So, and usually they don't have that many applications, and because they're an MPO, they get a sizable chunk. So usually anyone who
What's the Trail Net's relationship with the city, and what is how they prioritize this trail, Christy?
Thanks for asking. Billings Trail Net's role in with the city of Billings is to try to when the city of Billings doesn't have enough money for a trail, we provide matching funds. And so the Stagecoach Trail, which was on the, was discussed yesterday, they may not be able to build it. It was a $5.5 million grant from Transportation Alternatives, and they require $800,000 in matching funds, and so the city has to come up with $800,000. Billings TrailNet has pledged $100,000, and the city tried to pass a park and trail bond last year, and that failed. So they don't know how they're going to be getting that extra 800,000 or the 700 after Billings TrailNet gives their 100. As far as
so they what you're saying is they prioritize the Stagecoach Trail as their primary trail project.
Yeah, because it's so expensive, and they were given about $6 million, I think, or the $5.5 million for this 1 year, because there was such a backlog of different of TA funds that they hadn't spent over the past couple of years. So yes, they prioritized the Stagecoach Trail because we've got these cliffs in Billings that are almost impossible to traverse. Well, they are if you're a bicyclist or a pedestrian. And so people ride their bike up Zimmerman Trail, which is a 2-lane road, and it's really dangerous. Of course, there's lots of traffic on it, and they're on a small shoulder. And so that is the priority, because then it allows access to recreation up on the rims, where there's parks and hiking and things like that from the valley. As far as this trail is concerned, Billings TrailNet did a study. We've been conducting a lot of surveys, and with the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee and also Billings TrailNet, to find out where people want trails most. And the Stagecoach Trail was #1. We also get a lot of people asking for more trails out to extend the Big Ditch Trail. I think we had about 90 out of 200 people who wanted this the extension of the Big Ditch Trail, and so that's why Billings TrailNet took it upon themselves. And we realized that there are very few applications that come from our region, and so Billings TrailNet wanted to help our Region 5, with more applications because there are so few coming from this area.
So some things that stick out to me in this application is that it connects to an elementary school, a middle school, a campus, St. John's United Campus. That must be a church.
No, it's a.
Oh, elderly
I was gonna say that's a
residents,
massive
tender
senior.
nest, and a senior living center, plus a neighborhood and Holly Vista Park. Seems like a huge connector.
Yes.
And I like the project, but I know.
Yeah, okay. With the committee, with your internal.
I have a poker face. I don't know what you're talking
I
about.
think it's
No,
recreation. You can't say it's just transportation and not recreation. I think that we're splitting hairs here when we're saying
No.
well, that's your,
in the application, it says it's getting people to doctors, grocery stores, all these are destinations, these are all transportation purposes. I like the project, right? It scored well. But
Yeah, I
at the end
did.
of the day, are we going to reward? It's a big ask, right? Even $89,000 because they didn't even do that part of the application correctly. Are we rewarding an application that didn't even follow the guidelines?
So this was the hard part because it did score well. It is a good project. At the end of the day, when you have like the folks, when you send an application, there's probably people who aren't familiar with that area. It looks like a transportation project. And that's where it just got really hard. I wish they accepted partial funding because I think it would be partially funded if we could give them like half or something, because you could say like, okay, we're funding half is recreational, half is transportation, but they want full funding. It's a large ask for a small amount, and the application just came in that
So
way.
my question would be, if it was written differently, or could it be written differently could they just use different words next year? That would make it not transportation and recreation.
Could probably help push it out of the gray area. Yeah.
And then I would say, don't fund it and let them come back and give them that guidance. But that's, if it's truly what you're telling me, like they really are kind of in that gray area of they didn't apply correctly, or they just didn't write
I
it.
guess my problem with this whole
I get that.
recreation and transportation thing is I sometimes drive to the trailhead.
Yeah.
I'm recreating,
Yeah.
but I'm using my vehicle to get there. I think I understand your perspective, Shelby. I just happen to strongly disagree with it.
too.
So that's
But I'm just
I
saying-
also feel
that's
like,
where I'm
are
at.
we- Are we gonna be scrutinized again, splitting hairs? I mean, we're only on the fifth or
Yeah,
sixth.
and this is just it. We
you
have to
know,
cut
when-
something. So I'm like, this is one where you can cut them and say, just come back next year and give them the correct verbiage to use, and it probably flies through. So that's why I'm like, it just.
But then we're
they-
also looking at trying to get
Yeah.
new applicants in.
Right.
And again, we've had this conversation about, fair on the grid, or, fair geographic user groups,
Yeah.
and I know last year we talked a lot about
So
It sucks to wait a year,
issues
but it's
having
only a
their,
year.
and I get
Can
it,
we
but let's keep.
table it? and come
Yeah,
back?
I think that's what I was gonna say. I think I apologize for this discussion being so long.
No,
It was just a gray area one, but I think we table that one, see what else we got. Maybe there's another project where this one, we're like, well, this one could be a better,
We used to do that. We
flip-flop
used to
around.
build a list of wannabes.
Yeah.
I
Right,
remember
so
that.
that's fine.
Cool.
Yeah,
May I
And
ask a
then-
question, please? What part of the application is showing that it's just for transportation? Because I'm seeing that it says connecting families to park and schools.
I think
It looks-
generally speaking, in the beginning, like the project description, and then under recreational benefits, it just did list a lot of transportative type objectives. So that's what just came up. Again, it's hard because it did rank well. Like if we looked at the score, like it ranked well. It was just a head scratcher when we came into the internal meeting. We're like, there's a lot of transportative discussion here, and that's where it all came up. But again, I think definitely, I don't want to write this project off completely. I just think it's a good one to table and come back to. Fair?
Fair.
Okay. Prickly Pear Land Trust, 12 miles of trail rehab and reroutes as part of the effort to connect the South Hills to the CDT, 50,000. I believe these are MCC crews. So we talked a little bit about that workforce, encouragement, like we've talked about yesterday. One thing that the internal committee liked about this project was because Helena is a gateway, is that right? A gateway community for the CDT trail. And they're trying to make an effort to kind of more closely connect the CDT to Helena. This is just a portion of a larger effort to make that connection. So they liked it. They wanted to see it fully funded if we could see it fully funded. Thoughts, comments? Yeah.
I can't say anything.
Okay. Cone of silence.
But
I had a pretty big score, full funding is what I had suggested. I thought it was a good project.
They used all their other money that they've been awarded in the past?
I want to say yes.
I know that we've given them money.
We did not fund them in 22. We funded them in 23. I'm so certain that project is done and we're just waiting for them to come back with the final receipts and everything. That was good. Good talk.
No debate.
Let's see. Foys to Black Hill Trails. Did I say that? No. Foys to Blacktail Trails in Flat County. This project, I believe from the way the project reads, we funded them a year or two ago for these trails, and they're coming back asking, I believe, for more money to finish tread and improvements in drainage on the new trail. I'm assuming it was kind of like a cost became more than what they anticipated. So there's still work that needs to be done. It ranked well. It wasn't a huge ask. So the internal committee was fine with funding this one. I do understand like some caveats were like, well, we did give you money to do this already.
Yeah.
But it also ranked well. So
I wonder though, if this is one, would they accept partial funding?
I believe so.
I mean, is there, I'm not truly familiar with that application, but.
It's popular, but I could easily go partial.
Their comment is yes on partial funding for one MCC crew would help achieve some goals. I don't believe all work can be completed with one crew, but every little bit helps.
I'm fine with that.
If it's a wiggle room.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's.
I think that's fair. I think we did originally put full funding on this one, but after kind of hearing more here, I think that's still a fair way, very fair way to look at it.
yeah, it's a good project. They've gotten RTP money almost from day one. So if my memory is correct, several times over. And there's a whole lot of cooperation on this project too, partnerships. So, good project.
It's a great area.
It's my backyard, but
Yeah.
I'm totally cool with partial on that.
Missoula Nordic Ski Club. This one is for equipment, trail improvements and signage. There's a trail improvement and reroute that needs to happen at the Lubric. Am I saying that right? Lubric trail system, improved signage, and then also some new tracks for grooming the UM Golf Course and Patty Canyon. This one had equipment, which we like to prioritize this funding cycle. And the internal committee really liked, improving trails and signage for cross-country skiing. We don't see a lot of those come through. We thought it was a good overall project and application and fully fund. It's not $28,000 to do all that. It's pretty good.
And we better take advantage of the ability to purchase equipment while we can.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I agree.
Great. Sealy Lake Nordic Ski Club. This is a fairly standard request for winter trail grooming and summer trail maintenance, 27,000. It was a well-ranked application. I believe the internal committee, we talked about fully funding and if we can, partially funding if we can't, just based on it being a very regular request from the organization. But if we can fully fund it, then sure, they ranked well. Strong thoughts and feelings?
Did they have funding yesterday?
Oh, yeah. Did they?
Sealy Lake, yeah, for the maintenance shed. For
the shed.
Construction.
Yeah, I think
This is
what I
just-
said earlier, we're gonna start getting to the point where we're gonna have to start
Yeah.
doing some hard choices here.
Mhm.
And I don't know if this is the one, but you know.
So is this the suggestion of like looking at when we get to look at the dollars and cents, fully fund if we can, partially fund if it's getting wonky?
Partially fund on that one would be a good one. That's the
Well, and I
one.
mean, if you look at the overlay of STP and RTP, Sealy Lake, the Sealy area and the Missoula area, it's starting to get really, really dense right there. It,
Right.
It is.
yeah.
I'll also say Sealy draws from a long way.
Yeah, they do.
I go down to Sealy.
And they run it, they run it.
You know,
Yeah.
I happily drive an hour and a half to get there.
I'm not saying they're not worthy.
Yeah, no, but I'm just saying it has a huge draw. It's so it covers a big.
There are several events that draw people from all over the Northwest. to
Yeah, I mean,
see
people
the
from Cut Bank drive all the way down to Sealy. So, yeah.
Perfect.
I'm cool with all that.
So,
Okay.
oh, maybe.
Lolo National Forest Superior Ranger District, reestablishing 1.5 miles, the Trail Lake Trail.
Trail Lake Trail.
Trail Lake Trail. $52,000. Looking at a larger picture, there was a lot of requests coming from Lolo National Forest. We saw that yesterday too. And TSP, the internal committee recommended a partial fund on this one. They like that it was a very specific project that was going to get done. It's not a huge ask, but felt that just because of distribution and whatnot, that if they could accept partial funding, that we would try for that.
Will they?
Yeah. Great. Trying to make up time here. Mile High Nordic Ski Club. This one was a very straightforward request for a trailer and groomer equipment. We said fully funded.
Good.
Okay. Shelby, the city of Shelby,
I'd like to see the city of Shelby in there.
5.5 miles of crack seal and seal coat of the Roadrunner Trail, $65,000. So this one, it's a lot. We talked a lot about transportation. We talked about, I think they said they would accept partial funding in this one, but when you consider the cost to like move the equipment up there,
Right.
we were like, can you realistically really partially fund this kind of project? In the partial section, I think they said if they got partial funding, they might have to like wait or do some other figuring for funds for later. So I think in our eyes, it was kind of an all or nothing.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good.
Looks like they applied in 2023.
They did not receive funding.
They did.
No, it was to light the trail.
Oh,
Right.
that's right.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, this one is for crack and seal coat. We talked with Shelby a little bit about like, how often is that needed? Does it seem like it's an appropriate time and whatnot? And they said it looked appropriate, so.
And it's a phenomenal trail, phenomenal. I can't say enough about the trail, I don't know.
And it's in region
Four.
4.
Yep.
Yeah.
Are you getting a the thumbs?
That's a yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And I don't think that's a half.
Okay.
Just for the efficiency. that you mentioned.
Yeah. Going back to the Billings, City of Billings, this is phase 2 to connect trail to trails in Rose Park and make repairs on the existing Rose Park trails. We funded phase one, I want to say 2 cycles ago.
Yeah.
So this is a continuation of that project. Internal committee suggested a partial fund on this one since it's continued funding. But overall, it was a decently written application. It kind of fell in the upper middle of scores. But again, looking at how we're gonna divide everything up, there's a lot of high requests, so we thought maybe we would partially fund this one.
Did they say in their application, partial funding, what that
Yeah.
would amount to, or what it would be for?
I would have to dig it out unless someone has fast access.
I know.
I wish you could just search something on web grants.
So there's part of this that is trail construction and repairing, and I think the division was either, what does it say?
It says yes to partial.
They would construct the new portion and then postpone the repairs, I think.
Question, they tried to get phase 2 funding from trail stewardship last year
Mhm.
for this. And so they must have moved the application to RTP this year.
Mhm.
And did we not give them funding last year because we had so limited funding? I remember the conversation.
Yeah, I can't remember if they got funding last year. I think they might have gotten funding from RTP last year, and because of that, we said, come back next year for Rose Park, and then they put the stagecoach as their top priority for TSP, and then moved Rose Park here to RTP.
Okay,
I think.
yeah, that makes sense because there was one.
Good memory.
I think this is a great project.
Would anyone be opposed to us asking them to, if we just funded the construction portion?
Yeah.
Yeah, partial, yeah.
If you can fund them as much as you can.
Gotta do partial, yeah.
Okay.
Can always come back.
Glacier Nordic Club, this is for grooming as well as the purchase of an ATV with tracks. Ooh, this is where I need you to help me because I didn't get to quickly write down my notes in the file that I sent you. And then there, and then scroll down to Glacier. Whoops, up. What did we recommend? We recommended a partial fund for equipment and grooming. Oh, I think there was a lot of extra requests in the budget section here that wasn't fully just flushed out in the application itself. So we wanted to zone in on like, okay, what did they request for grooming and what did they request for the equipment? We'll fund those 2 things.
Okay with that.
Yeah.
They have requests in for STP funding as well.
Great. I like the equipment ones, they go really fast. Kootenai Cross Country Ski Club. This one was to purchase a John Deere 835 and Jinzu Groomer track setters. And then they also were requesting some funds for weed spraying. We discussed oh my gosh, where am I? Kootenai. Is this not in order? Oh, I know what's happening. May I?
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This is the
it's not a
year.
US made.
Oh, yeah.
But it is one of the better.
Nothing runs like a deer.
The little groomer, the Ginzu groomer is one of the best.
And
Those are cool.
just to
Oops.
note that every application on this page is basically a score of 39. It just happens to be that they're in alphabetical order. So point of note, as a person with an S last name. that always gets to the end of the
That's
line.
funny. So this one was a recommend partial funding focusing on the groomer.
Yeah.
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 March for what? I'm sorry, Stephanie.
For the grooming equipment.
For the
The
equipment.
equipment, okay.
Yeah, to focus in on that. Gallatin Valley Land Trust. This is on the Painted Hills Trail reroute and improvements to improve sustainability and protect wetland vegetation that the current trail currently runs through. The internal committee actually really liked this application because of the improvements to protecting the natural resource there. It seemed pretty pertinent. I know I've gone through there before and it does get very muddy and kind of like, oh, very close to these very delicate habitats. We recommended full fund just based on the environmental impacts of the project.
I'm trying to remember, did they have much for in kind on that in terms of their volunteer labor? I mean, it doesn't matter, but I'm just thinking that that's such a but strong organization that I would hope that they have in kind.
Yeah, I don't have it off the top. I think Tom might try and quickly pull something up.
That's just my thought, that if we're gonna have to start cutting,
Yeah, the
that would be a
boardwalk and
recommendation to them if they didn't have it in there.
the boardwalk and the reroute are important.
Yes.
But there's some
That's
other
what I have
components.
too. Yeah.
So support unless we find we need to make cuts somewhere. Is that what I'm hearing?
Were they open partial?
They were, while likely to reach our full budget through additional fundraising, this would slow down the project timeframe, potentially delaying the project. There's also ways to phase the project.
They're putting in 7,000 in cash and 1,500 in volunteer labor.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. Like if this money was going toward where volunteers could be. Because they're just, again, they're a strong organization. I'm sure they have people doing it. And if we're gonna have to partially fund things, that's one place where we
I've
can
done
suggest
as
to-
much as you can.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think what we're coming to on this one is fully fund if we can, but then like as much as we can. Again, the internal committee really likes the environmental protection portion
I
of
do
that.
too.
Yeah,
That's a good project. That's a
Yeah.
great organization.
and very heavily used. It makes sense. The Whitefish Legacy Partners, very popular. This one is to build a trailhead with amenities at the East Smith Creek and construct 2 miles of a natural surface trail. Requesting $100,000. The internal committee proposed 50% funding just based on how much they've come to this program for the Whitefish Trail, but still recognizing that it's been a great project and they've been doing good work.
Well, I think that the ADA amenities are important too, that they're really moving toward that, and recognizing that they have, other users that might not be able to get to it otherwise. I like that.
Okay.
I support 50%.
Okay. Bob Marshall Wilderness Foundation, 90 miles of wilderness trail maintenance with volunteers requesting $75,000. The internal committee suggested a partial fund on this one. They do great work, but they do come to us often for very similar requests. But they also seem to do really well, partial funding.
Yeah.
Okay. Last Chance Nordic Ski Club, we heard from them this morning in the public comment period, $21,000 for utility snowmobile roller compactor for grooming. We suggested full funding.
Good.
Yep. Bridger Ski Foundation, this one had a lot in its application, cross-country ski grooming, purchase of snowmobile groomer, outside kind, E&O contracted services, along with some other, I think, salaries and whatnot. This application, it had a lot in it. And I think because of that, some of the elements when you got to the budget were lost in the actual application. There was this education and outreach piece that would have had to been counted underneath our E&O portion. However, we didn't feel like it was very well developed and discussed in the application. So Our recommendation was to focus very specifically on the grooming and snowmobile groomer, just because we felt the application was it was almost too much for an application.
I mean, aside from the equipment, wasn't there overlap with the TSP application that we reviewed yesterday? Because they were requesting grooming of an array of their trails down in the area.
I think these are separate projects.
And it looks
trail
like
systems.
they're counting grooming operations twice in their budget, were they not? Just in this particular application.
Oh no, this is hard to share my screen. It won't let me.
I see salaries, snowmobile at $24 an hour for 300 hours for 7,200. And then down below, there's grooming, snowmobile at $20 an hour for 300 hours at 6,000.
So those are the two different groomers.
One's a large groomer, like a piston bully, and one's a snowmobile being pulled it.
Well,
And
it
they
says
we have-
snowmobile at 24 an hour, piston bully at 24 an hour, snowmobile at 20 an hour, piston bully at 120.
Sorry, I'm now pulling up this and I know it's sharing my screen and I don't want it to, but. This is a long one.
Almost
Is
there.
this what you're looking at?
Keep going, down, down, down. Go to the narrative, budget narrative.
Oh.
There. Okay, salary, snowmobile at 24 an hour for 300 hours for 7,200, piston bully at 24 for 250 hours. Now go down. And go, now there's grooming at the bottom there, snowmobile at one.
Oh,
right.
So one's for salaries and the other is for the machine use. So those are different. The grooming rate, 120 an hour for the piston bully or the snowmobile for 20 an hour. That's for fuel, gas, and maintenance. That does not include salaries.
Right.
So they are able to ask for that in addition to.
Okay. The other thing that I had a problem with was education for $42 an hour, communications and outreach. They're paying $42 an hour.
I think we're nixing that anyway, right?
I think, well, we kind of have to because we don't have enough money in the E&O budget to really fund that anyway. So I don't think we were planning on funding those outside kind services or they requested funds for Nordic Pulse. I don't think we'll be able to do that.
So I would say fund the equipment at 100% and grooming as much as you can.
Yep.
Okay.
Is that pretty well the staff recommendation?
Yeah, pretty
Okay,
much.
Good, yes.
Cool. Whoops.
Another US Forest Service.
Another Lovo application. Well, on your way, can you pull up the, I'm so sorry. So this one, oh wow, I lost it. Okay, rehabilitation of Albert Creek, 29,000, another Lovo Forest Service project. It ranked middle low ranking overall. The internal committee suggested a partial fund, potentially on the lower end of a partial. It was kind of like teetering between partially fund and potentially not fund if we find that we can't fund them all. And it was an okay application.
They're okay with partial on this one, or is it just?
It said yes on the partial. So, I mean, it depends on what we're looking at for partial. If it's like, well, maybe let's give them 10,000. I don't know if that would be enough, but those are those dollar and cents conversations. But if folks are okay with like a
I'd say partial if you can, but it's okay to cross it off the list too, or talk to them and see if it made sense. Maybe they'd come back and say, yeah, we'll with.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Okay. All right, moving on. The next one is the Hebgen Lake Ranger District. This is another fairly general, frequent request for seasonal staff for trail maintenance, requesting 40,000. Based on what we said with other similar requests that are really consistent for general season staff, we were going to consider a partial fund on this one. Okay. Absaroka Beartooth Wilderness Foundation, maintenance projects for this year and next year, and then also salaries for their trail stewards. I wish the application dove a little bit more deeply into the benefit of the trail stewards. I think the conversation was like that was missing a little bit. They were like, they wanted funding for them, but there wasn't a lot about what they did or the real benefits of it. So we were just going to suggest a partial funding with a probably focus on the trail maintenance projects.
Probably where a picture would say 1,000 words if they, I don't know, maybe they.
Are the trail stewards, so the trail stewards get a salary? Is that new to this group?
It's like a, no, I think it's been kind of starting up over the last few years. You look like you
Well,
know
we just
something.
changed the name. They've been funded under the OHV program in the past, a little, not much from snowmobile, but OHV. RTP, we used to call it Trail Rangers. We trailed the name to changed the name to Trail Steward, what, about 5 or 6 years back. The name changed, but it's been in the mix for a long time. Matter of fact, I know the guy that's one of the trail stewards down at the Hebgen Lake Ranger District.
Oh wait,
They
this
do a
is
good
for
job.
the Absaroka Beartooth?
Pardon
or
me?
The Absaroka Beartooth?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I was looking back at the Hebgen Lake.
Oh,
I was
okay.
still looking at the Hebgen Lake.
Moving on.
Yeah. No,
Um,
they serve a very good purpose.
Yeah, no, I'm wondering,
Yeah.
are those are seasonal employees, or are they people
Yeah.
who kind of just work on the weekend and get a stipend? I mean, like, that's what I.
From my understanding, they are seasonal employees. I think they technically consider them like a contracted service. I don't think they consider them salaried
And they're not
employees.
US Forest Service, no.
No.
Looks like they have a lot of projects and if you did give them partial, they could just cut back on the projects.
Well, and I'm pretty sure this area, and I didn't have this pulled up, but this area also got pretty hit by the floods. I mean, there's trails that we still can't get to in there.
So the wilderness stewards, they're there for 16 weeks, $1,700 a month is the request.
And not to sound silly, but what definition again of this steward? What is the steward out there doing?
My understanding, and again, this is where I felt like they could have maybe did a little bit more deep dive into them.
Yep.
But I believe they like create these positions within the ABWF, and then they actually go out and work with Forest Service crews. These
Often
guys
like an
then-
MCC crew.
But like they have this staff and then they mostly work with the Forest Service. I don't know how to explain
Says
this very well.
volunteer trail stewards seasonal are exposed to a variety of tasks and opportunities in the natural resource conservation field. Public, private, nonprofit, we qualified crew members today and will develop professionals tomorrow. Lovely
Yeah,
words.
sure.
It is.
Yeah.
You know what? It varies with the forest.
Yeah.
I know with the Hebgen Lake Ranger District guy that is primarily their trail steward is actually a Forest Service employee, and he works OHV in the summertime and snowmobile in the wintertime. And their job is partially maintenance, partially noxious weed control, and partially talking to recreationists on the trail and sharing information about the rules and the laws and so on. So that's what most of them do. Now, I'm not sure about the AB trail steward, exactly how that's set up. Most of the ones we funded through the OHV program have been more like I just described down the Hebgen Lake Ranger District.
Sorry, I didn't mean to slow us down. but-
No. Clarification is
What
good.
was the staff's recommendation?
Partial with a focus on the projects. Gardner Ranger District. This is for 15 miles of trail rehab. We liked that these trails, they were specific trail projects being called out. It was a fairly low cost, but also considering the ranking, we suggested a partial fund on this one, just kind of fund what you can kind of a situation. I think they said that this was a fairly important connecting piece to different trail systems, so that bumped it up a little bit. All right. Bitterroot Backcountry Horseman, 3.5 miles of maintenance on the Fred Burr Trail in Mill Creek. This one didn't rank as high as, you know, I was hoping it would. I think it was a decent project. It just didn't rank that high. And unfortunately, they have requested, or they will not take partial funding, which makes this one harder, considering the ranking. So based on just where it fell in the ranking and that they won't accept partial funding, we were considering a no fund on this one, but open to feedback. But knowing that we, again, as we've been saying, like as we go down the list, those dollars get tighter and tighter.
Oh, this is John. You like to see a different group like the horsemen apply for a project.
Yeah.
You know, Western groups.
That's where some of these get harder.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, we want you to apply, but they didn't quite apply well.
You know, this might be another, the snowmobile thing we talked about yesterday.
Mhm.
Is that allowable in the RTP program or
Right.
like the backcountry
Oh,
portion of Montana?
of Montana. Mhm.
Oh, they can't.
Because we cannot, yeah, they can't then sub out the funding
Okay.
because we're already a subrecipient.
Okay. Gotcha.
We're already doing third party.
But could this funded under the STAC, the trail stewardship, instead of RTP?
It's eligible.
Not this year.
In the future, I think I think TSP would be a friendly program to a backcountry horseman operation in the future, but I think a sub-grant might be an option too for the state level backcountry
It's like
horse.
the MSA application.
Right.
It could be a grant to the backcountry horsemen of Montana for them to work with their chapters around the state. So it would be perfect for that.
Was somebody wanting to talk online?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I don't see it as a must, but a nice to have. And since we're getting down to the, you know, kind of squeezing into the smaller funds, I would recommend cutting this one.
Great. I mean, not great.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, this one was hard again. I like the project. I wish it ranked higher. If they were accepting partial fund, I would suggest partial fund, but I can't. So the next one, Beaverhead Deer Lodge National Forest. This is for 12 miles of new trail connecting Echo Lake trails and the disco ski area that will be groomed for cross-country skiing. We really liked this project. It was another project we really liked that we wished ranked higher. I think there was a good discussion about like the potential there to have those trails. There was, I think, some concern in the application related to if they'd be able to keep up with the maintenance, because I think they had mentioned that they had some, like trying to keep up with the maintenance, everything was already a problem. So adding 12 miles of trail seemed like, is that going to be okay? We recommended a partial or no funding on this one. If no funding, just recommending like with further planning, maybe another application down the line. Kind of a situation.
We gave them money last year for a vault toilet up there.
Okay.
For a what?
Did we?
Vault toilet
For TSP?
for those guys, yeah. up
Oh.
there in that place.
Yeah. Is that fairly agreeable then?
Yeah.
Okay. Next one, Silvercrest. This was a standard grooming request and then the purchase of equipment. And we said to fund the equipment.
Yeah.
We may not be able to fund the grooming portion in addition to. We are just flying, guys. Beartooth Recreational Trails. This is again, mixing a standard request for cross-country ski grooming. And then trail maintenance and improvements. I'm trying to remember what this one was.
I'm gonna speak up for this one. They talked about the West Fork Road and Nordic Center, the only groomed cross-country trails close to eastern Montana. That the nearest groomed trails are located over 120 miles away. The West Fork Road is one of the most heavily used winter recreation sites in the area. You can never get on that trail without bumping into a lot of people. So having more options, they do need more trails because there is pressure on the current trail inventory. And I don't know why they scored so low, but I would recommend full funding for this one.
Yeah. So I will say at this point, it's really hard to fully fund some of these at where we are, just based on the ranking. I think we recommended a partial fund and then just kind of determining if it's more important to fund the grooming portion or the improvements portion. That's kind of a toss up and maybe up to them to decide, but that's kind of where we were.
This is the system at Red Lodge, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought so, okay. Yeah, they've applied, I don't know how recently, they applied a long time ago, trail development maintenance down there. It's been quite a few years ago. It's a good organization, I know, and they have a really nice system down there. As stated, it's the only one in the area.
Yep. Exactly.
So why did it score so low?
They applied last year.
They did.
I have my notes. I just can't.
You know, since you're looking, I gotta add something. Most of you know Beth Shoemate. She may be on yet today. Way back in our early friendship, she was a consultant for a while, and she actually did a plan and an application for this very organization for money. This probably back in the late 90s somewhere. Yeah, Beth's fully familiar with this.
She was 13 at the time.
So my notes for probably partially why it scored low was that many items listed in the budget weren't fully or thoroughly described in the application: bridge, backhoe, need for salaries, etc. We said fund grooming if we can, unique area to state for cross-country skier, like, yes. So part of the reason was just, I don't think we felt the application was fully flushed out. There were things in the budget that didn't really connect until you got to the budget, like, oh, where'd that come from? Kind of a thing. So that's part of it.
We're running into what we ran into last year. A, not enough funds, and then B, you know, what rises to the top are the organizations that are stronger, and then they keep getting more, and then the organizations that are smaller keep getting less.
Yeah.
And it's a disparity that you can't, you know, yes, they should be better storytellers and do that. But when you have all these organizations that are all volunteers, I mean, we've seen it with some of the snowmobile organizations, we've seen it across the board. And I can understand what the other thing that's gonna happen is when these smaller groups don't get funding, they're just gonna get discouraged and quit. I mean, we've already seen that.
I made the note just to say, you know, fund partial if you
Yeah,
can.
and that's not
and-
just this one.
Right, exactly. But I make notes on key ones like these to say, encourage them to come back because that's, you know, that's important.
And this is kind of.
To come back and get their application reviewed by Stephanie before they submit it.
Yeah.
For improvement.
Right.
And this is also where, like, now that we have a fuller picture, we kind of can go back at those ones that did rank high and be like, okay, well, equity.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's, I feel like that's been a theme.
It's part of it. There's no clean way.
No, it's not. And the scoring is, it helps, but it's not the full story.
All right, good notes on that one. I'm gonna go on to Clear Trails, Carbon County. This is for the rehabilitation of trail side trailhead facilities at the BLM
TC.
Matisse, thank you, Spires, and a decompost toilet for 44. Unfortunately, this one didn't rank very high. I believe from my memory, this application kind of had, first there was just some issues with the way they had answered some of the questions that weren't very direct or didn't make a lot of connections. And then there was a lot of stuff in the application that didn't end up being part of the budget, and it was just causing some confusion. Am I remembering this right? So it was just hard to connect the budget to the application and figuring out like what's what. So I think that's why it ranked fairly low. Recognizing that it is a unique area. The internal committee at the time recommended no funding for this one just based on where it kind of fell.
I think it's gonna be another one of those where that education component and resources, is, some one-on-one mentoring, unfortunately is, and that's staff time, and that's, you guys don't have that.
Mhm. And then the West Yellowstone Ski Foundation, this one was for purchase of rubber tracks for low snow grooming. So I will say this one is equipment purchase, however, due to the ranking fall. And then also there was discussion at that point in the conversation, like how much money is left, where are we going to put it? The discussion turned to more like a need versus a want. And they felt that this was more of a want than a need for equipment because it helped them extend the shoulder season essentially of the ski season. Unless folks have like more context to me, that's how it turned to the internal committee. It was more of a like, we could extend the shoulder season as opposed to this is like critical infrastructure. Not a lot of money, but sometimes that makes a difference in what we can shift around.
Yeah, there's others, if the money was available, I think would be more important than this one for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Well, we started off slow, but we really kicked it off there at the end. I guess the only thing I'd want to maybe questionably go back and get a temperature check for how folks are feeling overall. Do we feel like, some of these lower ones where we're like partial or no or whatnot, depending on where we decide to prioritize funding, we may or may not be able to fund the Building Trail Net one that was kind of a gray area one, or are we like feeling really strong for no, we need to push this project through, or we kind of still figure out the dollars and cents and see if it makes sense? I just want to take a quick temperature check.
Well, one thing that pops out to me is like $10,000 of their $10,000 of that application is non-eligible.
Yeah.
So, and then they said no partial funding, right?
Yeah.
Which one is this?
This is Billings Trail
Billings,
Net.
no,
Oh,
yeah,
Big ditch.
Billings
Big
Net, I was
ditch.
just looking at that.
And so that makes me wonder if that just rules it out entirely.
Right. Because it would be forced.
They would accept partial funding if you were to award what they're eligible for.
Okay.
Okay.
I think though, kind of looking at these last three, I mean, we had 2 in Carbon County, 1 in Yellowstone. Again, we're back to this, we're repeating ourselves, the same thing.
Yeah.
We say we want something and we're doing something different. And it's this bad cycle, right? This is what we're doing. And I don't know how to change that. And I'm frustrated, not just because of where I live, but It wouldn't matter if they were in Powder County, Powder River County, or they were in Weebo County. I just feel like the
West gets more.
yeah, yeah.
Well, they get more
And I mean,
applications.
we have different public land systems, but even this last one was a BLM. You know, first, is it the only BLM project we saw?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yep.
So, you know, if you're looking at how the different federal organizations operate, and we had an in-depth conversation about BLM not being able to get recreation money to do different things. And then, you know, but they have a low score, they have an incomplete. So how do we overall, yes, we have to do with this money, but how do you know, you guys are busting your butt, but how do we turn the tide on this? I think it's super, super important. We're just gonna be sitting at the same table
Right.
a year from now having the
So-
same conversation.
I do want to ask Bob too, for the Trails Coalition, if there has been any interest expressed in writing, you know, working on legislation that would support a new arm of funding. I just think that the marijuana money gives us a lot of opportunity to expand roles within Fish, Wildlife and Parks for that resource library / technical assistance position. If we truly want to see more equitable and regional cooperation, I also think that there's a lot of opportunity with this pilot project at Commerce and ways that they could help bring regional. So again, circling back to that conversation yesterday where we talked about working agency to agency. And I know it's difficult. I work for the state. Collaboration, even within the state, is often sometimes very difficult because you're just keeping your head above water with the staff that you have. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
I have thoughts.
I bet you do.
Don't expect it from Fish, Wildlife and Parks. Not on that aspect. And I'm not being critical of the staff, but they're doing what they're allowed to do.
Yeah, and they're busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
But this collaboration, the outreach and so on ain't gonna happen. Not the level you're talking.
Right.
And so right now, what we're talking about, of course, it's gonna take money. Through the Trails Coalition, we're gonna be hiring a part-time person. The work, it's already in the works, but it's only gonna be somebody to work about 40 to 50 hours a month initially because of finance. And we've done a little bit of fundraising, but we only have about 15,000 to bank right now. That's gonna allow us to try it for 6 months. But the idea is gonna be is we're in the process of developing a fundraising plan. And the whole idea, we've got a strategic plan that's pretty well done now that we've worked on over the last 6 months. And part of that strategic plan in the long run, if we can finance it, is outreach. It's doing exactly what you're talking about right now because it's needed. But don't expect it from Fish, Wildlife and Parks. I worked there for 17 years. I know the current leadership. Ain't gonna happen. No offense to you guys. Like I say, you're doing what you're allowed to do and what you can do, given the staff time.
And, you know, one example is, you know, last year we sat and talked and said, how do we get the grooming people to, you know, tidy up their grants and get better at things? So I helped a little bit with the MSA. You know, I don't know if you saw the piece that was attached to a couple of the grants on SCORE, you know, but we worked on that and we pushed that down through.
I definitely saw that.
And I thought the grants came out cleaner this year.
Yeah. Much.
I know Kings Hill was, you know, scored low, but, you know, again, like Stephanie said, we know them, they're a good group. But it just, you know, and I thought the piece that, you know, talked on Scorp and hit every single point. You know, pretty good.
Hey, Stephanie, just to pull us back on topic for Billings from that, I think telling them, hey, come back next year won't be that big of a deal. If Billings themselves prioritized a different trail, then I don't think waiting a year is a big problem. I mean, obviously, we all see the value in this. It's a good project. But if the city of Billings themselves are prioritizing other projects, I don't think waiting a year is going to be that negatively impact.
And I think by also encouraging them to rewrite it with the focus on rec, not transport, and I think it would zip. I think it would
Good
come through.
application.
Yeah, it's already very good. It just needs a tweak, and waiting 1 year, like you said, is not the end of the world.
You know, the BLM, we talked a little bit about that, or that agency yesterday. They have a very good, Brad Colin is his name, he's out of Butte, but he's kind of their lead, especially in the OHV area, but he's involved in recreation on a broad base too.
Typically, we always had a BLM person in this meeting, but they
used to, yeah.
They invited or not invited this year, or?
They were contacted. I don't know if we had any, I don't think we had follow-up or the.
Well, where I was going with that is, I'll talk to Brad a little more, but they have a Montana Dakota's meeting of staff annually over in Billings. And I'll see if we can't get on their agenda. That may be a start to share the information about the programs that are available, how to apply, what we're looking at. That's it, but that'll only be a start.
Shelby have something to add?
Yeah, is there any other projects we need to circle back to?
No,
No? Okay.
no, we're good. So sorry. Yeah, it is kind of open format at this point. I've transitioned. Go on, Bob. Sorry.
Oh, no, it's just that it'd be a start at least, and then it might be a map going out to now there's 3 racks around the state to share information. It's a start. It'd be a start. I made a note about that yesterday. So,
Bob, am I correct in saying that he's the head of the United States, OHB for the United States?
Brad is responsible at that level, yes.
Yeah, level, yeah.
Yeah, he's right in view. He's a great guy, but he's involved in recreation as a whole because he's been heavily involved in that scratch gravel plan that involves horses and mountain bikes and hikers and the whole bit.
So my next door neighbor is a regional manager for the BLM, Katie Stevens. And her husband does a trail grooming up at Echo Lake that we're gonna maybe not find a lot, but anyhow, yeah, well, some few words with her could also help a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those trails, I think that would also be a really good contender for coming back again.
Yeah.
I think it just needed a little bit of a punch up in the application. It'd probably fall through because we liked the project. It was just kind of like, dang it, kind of a situation. Okay, any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
Good process and continuing improvements. Thank you for allowing us to weigh in on RTP. I know that was a big discussion over the course of things, and just having the staff be, that's been a good process too, so.
Definitely, we appreciate it. And if you made comments on your sheets, send them to me. I do scan those in and go through everything. And I've taken notes also from our meeting. Is there any other housekeeping?
I don't think so. I want to thank, we'll set a meeting for on August, but thank everyone for their time yesterday and today. And thank you for all the time you dedicated to this process. 90 some applications to review is a lot. And we do appreciate the time and dedication you put into this. And so I think really looking at the calendar down the road, the next meeting of the STAC will be the summer meeting, and that's more of the administrative process. I think we'll do that completely remote again, so it wouldn't be a location. But it would just be to look over the guidelines, talk about those updates, and look at the application prior to any tweaks there. So I think we can send out a poll via email, but sometime late August would kind of be where that meeting would be couched.
I think we do have some things we need to follow up on, and that is the sign-on letter. Right? And do you want members of the staff to write that and then give it to the staff, to you, Tom? separate?
Yeah, I think so. I think maybe working with Bob and the Trails Coalition would be the best route, and we could potentially put together a call much sooner than August if we wanted to rehash some of those topics when it comes to technical assistance around the state, looking at regional recreation planning. And there was one other component we had kind of highlighted yesterday. So do people think that's the
Like
immediate next step that's a priority?
Yeah, I mean, I have 11 things that I jotted down
Okay.
yesterday of things that we need to improve or make recommendations on. Sorry, 11 things.
Yeah.
I just kind of kept track of them. I don't know if you're gonna go back into the recorded session yesterday and pull those out, or if you want my notes, I can clean them up. Send them to you.
That would be great. And then, well, it kind of sounds like we should set up a follow-up to address these kind of housekeeping and planning topics potentially in early April. Would a Zoom meeting?
When does my position completely end?
I believe you and Bob, and that's something that we're gonna
address
clear up. Working with Stephanie Brown and in our division to get a grasp on how that timing is gonna work, but I believe it's June of 24.
Okay. So I won't take part.
There are a lot of us, I think, on this committee whose time is up, or will we be invited to come back, or? How does
Yeah,
that-
like Tom said, I'm working on that right now and just going through some of the processes that we need to follow. So what I'll be doing here in the next couple weeks is sending out an application, and you'll just have to fill it out again, and we'll be recommending that if you want to participate again, we'll be putting that forward as our recommendation. It does have to go through our director's office and the governor's office for reappointment. So we'll also be doing a call for new members, for those that are termed out. So we will have a couple openings on this committee, and I'll put a plug in here just because I know that we have some members of the public watching. We'll also have some seats open on our OHV committee as well, and our snowmobile advisory committee. So we'll be putting that call out for new members here very soon.
Thank you.
You bet.
I'll just make a couple of points just as a state agency person that has a board of trustees. The lieutenant governor has told us that your position remains until it is filled. So you may be termed off, but they're assuming you're going to stay in the position until that position is replaced. That's what I've been told, Stephanie. So just.
Yeah, we have not received that direction, so I can't speak to that directly. Our direction has been that everybody needs to reapply.
No, yes, reapply, but those terming off. So I would have whoever's in touch with the governor's office get clarity on it. That would be my request.
So then I think we'll,
Yeah, sorry,
ahead,
just
Beth.
a quick comment about the solicitation process too. This is a great opportunity for the word of mouth across to your own networks, especially as we continue to think about those representatives from some of the central and eastern parts of the state that we maybe don't otherwise always connect with. So a great opportunity to really be thinking about those trail networks, the tourism, outdoor recreation networks that you can also try to, hey, so-and-so in Plentywood or Glasgow or some of those locations that we otherwise maybe aren't always seeing represented. So just an opportunity. Thank you.
So then Stephanie and I will be in contact with you, just following up on this process and letting you know when public comment and that press release comes out. And then I think we'll probably follow up early next week separately to readdress what these issues are and how we want to summarize them and package them as a group, and then figure out next steps. And that would be maybe an hour or two meeting in early April we could put together to just move right to these recommendations and solidify those. So in terms of next steps, look for our correspondence early next week, and then we'll have additional correspondence that's related to really what we covered with these funding allocations, and then the continued process of closing out this cycle. Any other thoughts, additional comments before we close? Well, thanks again for all the time and dedication, and have a good March.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.